Preparation time expired. Debate start.
Okay. Prime Minister, you can start. I forgot to tell you guys, I tested positive. I'm just kidding.
Oh, ano ka?
Am I audible? Black Lives Matter is a decentralized movement advocating for non-violent civil disobedience in protest against incidents of police brutality, and all racially motivated violence against African American people. This has been going for quite a while, and people are still fighting for the issues of oppression and alienated that are being faced by Black people just because they're born to be Black, which they have no choice of. So, what are similar oppressed and alienated racial ethnical groups? We think that there are every racial and ethnical groups that are still facing the issues that are being focused by Black Lives Matters movements 2020, which are they are still facing racial injustice, police brutality, criminal justice reform, Black immigration, economic injustice, LGBTQ and human rights, environmental conditions, voting rights and suppression, healthcare, government corruption, education, common sense, gun laws. I repeat, it's based on the issues that are being focused by the movement of Black Lives Matter. So we think that any racial groups or ethical groups that are still facing the same problem deserved to deserve to also being included in this campaign to get the rights and the justice that they deserve. Why so? Because from the goal of the Black Lives Matter itself is to get the racial justice, to vanish police brutality, to vanish criminal justice reform that is not fair for the Black people, and also the economic impact that caused by simply because they are Black, and so on and so on. So the goal here is we want these people to receive the rights that they deserve, to not having to be in danger simply because they are born to Black, because we cannot choose what we are born to. So we think that giving these issues, giving these problems and putting these people in danger simply because they are born Black is not a form of justice at all. But sadly, this is not only faced by black people. Many other races and ethnic groups still facing the same thing, which I will discuss more into the proof that there are still many other race and ethnic groups that facing the same problems with Black people. So the oppression itself, the definition of the oppression itself is that the social act of placing severe restrictions on an individual, group, or institution, typically a government or political organization that is in power, places this restriction formally or covertly and oppressed groups so that they might be exploited and less able to compete with other social groups. The oppressed, the individual or group, is devalued, exploited, and deprived of privilege by the individual or group who has more power. And we also cannot we all know that Black Lives Matter, Black people, the issues that's going on is not just start this. It's just not happening now. It's been happening forever. Black people has been suffering from this injustice because of their skin for so long, and they barely get an act to it. And now it is and this movement is starting because the top of it that's starting this movement is the victim of racial injustice that happened to the former George Floyd, that being killed by a police officer because of um, because of because because of the racism that is still happening, even still possessed by this police officer. Because why? Because they know that because it happened because they know that um, these people has barely have privilege. So that's why we think that's why the police officer do this, because they know that if they do it to these Black people, they will not get a safer punishment because they are Black, and it's the stigma of the racism that these Black people might be bad. So so this is what we want to stop happening. And why we want other races, why we want to expand this so that other races, because the other races facing the same problem. I will give you proof that why this is really necessary. And if you don't think so, we need to ask you need to reflect yourself about how you see justice if you do not agree to these motions. For one of the really safer and pathetic proof is that one of ethnical in China, Uyghur. It is a ethnical minority in the province of Xiangwa, and it's in a Chinese Muslim ethnic group. Um, what happened to them is that they have no rights. They are being discriminated by the majority because they are minority. And then what happened? The one of the thing that happened is that they are being sterilized because they because they have no rights, because people think that they don't have the right to live. So and then whatever then because they don't have a right, so they are being so the worst thing that happened is that they are being sterilized without their consent, because the majority think that they shouldn't they shouldn't do more make more people. And then there are so many other racial injustice that my next speaker will give more to this debate. Thank you.
Check.
Okay, I just got back. Yeah, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, we in the opposition side believe that today's motion will be harmful towards the movement itself and towards the social justice that we are trying to achieve. Here in the opposition side, we believe that a mechanism of diversification of movement and specification of each movement uh, instead of expansion of Black Lives Matter would be beneficial towards this debate. Now, ladies and gentlemen, one point of rebuttals towards the government team. Now, they have explained the very basic idea of there are a certain races that goes through the same struggle as the Black Lives Matter African American in the US. They've brought the example of Uyghur in China, for example. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that this kind of expansion that we are trying to include the Uyghur people in China would be unbeneficial towards towards the movement towards the Uyghur China itself, because we associate the Black Lives Matter with the US, ladies and gentlemen, and we should know that Uyghur people are discriminated because of their religion, for example, and this will be explained later in my argument, instead of their ethnicity, and therefore there are different background in this case. Now, towards my one argument, this kind of expansion will be harmful towards movement, both Black Lives Matter and other people that we are trying to include, for example. Firstly, this kind of expansion will create a less focused movement. How so, ladies and gentlemen? Like I've said before in my rebuttals, this kind of movement, even though they are similarly oppressed by government or by higher power, they have different actor and different target, ladies and gentlemen. Black Lives Matter, for example, the actors are U.S. government, the police, and the citizen of U.S. Meanwhile, Uyghur in China are discriminated due to their religion, which is Islam, ladies and gentlemen, because Islam is sort of linked to terrorism. And this kind of for another example is that the Papuan movement involve Indonesian government and its citizens, ladies and gentlemen. And we believe that this expansion create due to the different actor and different target. We believe that this kind of movement will create more target, and it will create a less focused movement, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why we believe that diversification of movement and specification of each movement would be beneficial in this debate. And also, not every domain of BLM Black Lives Matter has been achieved yet, and now we are trying to add another one, ladies and gentlemen. And this also will prove to you that creating another goal, for example, in the Black Lives Matter would not be beneficial towards the previous goal that Black Lives Matter are trying to achieve. And therefore, we believe that we should create a separate movement and operated by different people that knows exactly what those movement needs, ladies and gentlemen. And therefore, both of this movement, the Black Lives Matter and the other movement, for example, the Papuan Lives Matter, for example, if we are trying to create a movement here, they both can do it separately and support each other and achieve their goal faster, ladies and gentlemen, due to their focusedness. And we believe that in this expansion, why is it harmful, ladies and gentlemen? Because it will demotivate people to have discussion about it because there's so much to cover. For example, if we are trying to discuss Black Lives Matter in the government's case, ladies and gentlemen, we have to cover the Hawaiian exploitation, we have to cover the Papuan life, we have to cover the African American that is already a complex matter, ladies and gentlemen. And we believe that diversification of this movement will create a better understanding. Oh, in Black Lives Matter that fights for the African American people, their struggle is this, their problem is this. The US government did this to them, for example. And in the Hawaiian people, the background is this. Oh, they are colonized. They are struggling this. These are their struggle. These are what they are trying to do. And this kind of separation will be beneficial because we can differentiate each uniqueness, each background of every racial and ethnical group, ladies and gentlemen. And also, why exactly it will be harmful towards the movement? Firstly, it will create an inefficiency, ladies and gentlemen. If we expand, for example, towards another race like Hawaiian or any other things, this kind of movement happen in different region, ladies and gentlemen, with different political condition and different social condition. And we need, due to this difference, we believe that we need a different campaign approach that is suitable for these people, ladies and gentlemen. People in Hawaiian and people in the African American US, we believe they need to have a different campaign approach, ladies and gentlemen, because their political condition is different, their demand is different, their target is different, ladies and gentlemen. And also, why exactly it will create why it will be harmful towards the movement, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, there are certain narrative attached to Black Lives Matter that is unnecessary or even harmful towards other movement. How so, ladies and gentlemen? In certain media and political alignment, like in the Republican Party or the Conservative in America, Black Lives Matter often attached to riots, chaos, and looting, ladies and gentlemen. How this will be unbeneficial? This will be unbeneficial towards other movement, because even though, like for example, the Hawaiian people who has never done this kind of looting will be attached to this kind of chaos, ladies and gentlemen, that has been done by the Black Lives Matter movement. And we know, ladies and gentlemen, and even though the Hawaiian protest is always peaceful, and people will think because it is attached to Black Lives Movement, it will create a stereotype that every movement that the Black Lives Matter represents is always looting and rioting, and this kind of narrative would be harmful, and therefore we proudly oppose. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Prime Minister.
Check, am I audible? Check.
Yeah.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Here as a Deputy Prime Minister Novianti Anggraini. First, I would like to rebut the argument from the opposition leader that saying why Muslim did something that or terrorism in China. He said Muslim is terrorism, that's why it happened in China. But it is the same problem with Black Lives Matters. They are being oppressed because of their belief and background. And also, let me make it clear one more time from my opening government argument that the purpose of Black Lives Matter itself is to get the rights and safety regardless of the background. Let's see the analogy. In the hospital, they will give a treatment first to the dying patient rather than just a fever. Because the dying patient life in danger. That's what my opening government said. Why the Black Lives Matter is important. We are not side away the other racial issue or ethnical groups issue, but we know the Black Lives Matter. It's in danger. Also, the riot is just a part of the flow. In fact, they are doing in a good way, calm way, harmful way. That's been happening many times. Also, I think that's it for the rebuttal. Next to my argument, like for my argument, first argument is like my previous speaker said that Black Lives Matters is matters because why is in danger. This is basically on the cases that George Floyd, an American man living in Minneapolis, was brutally murdered by the police, right? Who knew on his neck for upwards. That's the first, not that the first, but the blow up the
Point.
campaign. It start from that. Sorry, no, thank you. Also, the many voices are speaking up against injustice, all different race, background, and age. when asking some of my peers what Black Lives Matter means to them and what action they want to see done to further equality and a different press policing. Uh, Also, the other also the other racial seems like Uyghur people it's suffering from the the racial that China gives to them because the background is because they're just Muslim and they just different and the cultural and ethnical is so different that uh, the China forced them to following the mechanism of their country like at the at the Xinjiang the China government said that Uyghur should following the capitalism and the cultural things from China and erase the originally Uyghur tradition. Also, that's same like Black Lives Matter. So that's why my opening government and my side it's really agree with this motion that really want to expand the Black Lives Matters campaign and also the other racial and ethnical groups oppressed. And also, how we do so by the mechanism. We will put other rest or ethnical group issue in exposure and petition in the movement so they can get the right they deserve. And also, when you talk about other race and other thing about the petition about Black Lives Matter, that will help so much. Uh, why is this is necessary? Because many race and ethnical group don't get right safety and what we call it justice they deserve, and this motion will support our goal. I repeat, this motion will support our goal to fight for us and ethnical groups that don't get the justice they deserve just yet. And also, many at Twitter's campaign this Black Lives Matter situation for the best good result for the black people. uh, and because you don't understand about it, see the issue doesn't exist. The issue is still a lot of out there. Like at the Twitter, they're talking about the all black people racial issue that police officer did, and also why we don't we don't we don't say that we don't support the all life matters, but Black Lives Matter is important uh, uh, because everyone's everyone needs the justice, but the important part is the Black Lives Matter. Also, just because you see and it doesn't being exposed like black struggle, it doesn't mean it's not there. It is happening. Many victims and many lives are in danger. So yeah, that's so important to expand the Black Lives Matters campaign and expand to the other racial issue like Uyghur and uh, what we call it at the Philippines race. Uh, I mean, I think we think that all minorities are alive or matter, just like majorities racial. That's why our side is really agree with this motion at this morning. Uh, and once again, that for the people who are already lucky enough to have their privilege, it can control any other person who speaking out about Black Lives Matter. So that's why our side is strongly agree with this motion at this morning. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, now to the deputy leader of the opposition.
Am I audible?
Speak a bit louder, please.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kasalonika, as the DLO of Opposition House of session host, I would like to rebut some of the statements that being said by the OG team. That first of all, the PM took an example of Muslim minority in Agyar, while the movement is to particularly advocate for black people. That is a race, and Muslim is not a race. This motion is about particularly oppressed racial or ethnical group. This was then elaborated repeatedly by the DPM. And then the DPM says that LO says Muslim is terrorism in China. What part of my LO stated that? Because he says that
Can't hear.
Muslim in China
Point.
that Muslim in China is discriminated because of their religion. Does this prove there's a different condition? They must understand the point. And if even if BLM movement
Point.
no thank you is used in China, it would not work too, since they're not democratic and won't allow social movements. And then even though they are a separated movement, they still can support each other. Just because it is different movement, it doesn't mean we only can support one movement. And then they brought the example of hospital, and this prove our point, because in hospital each patients are being put into their own separate room. Because why? Because they have different needs of medication. They need to be treated differently. You won't treat battle wounds with a scrap wounds, right? And for example, if we take the approach of BLM, which is marching in the streets, this will not work, because China government used the ideology of communism, like I said earlier, that it won't allow social movements, and it will be different in US or in Indonesia, where the government is more democratic. And then I would my rebuttals would be integrated in my arguments. So first of all, Black Lives Matter is an organization, an umbrella that fights for Black people, specifically in the US, against discrimination and generally to fight off white supremacy that lives upon their system, that creates exclusion and alienation and even violence against Black people. Black Lives Matter is created by Patrice Khan, Alicia Grask, and Opal Tometi, who is African American and intended to the movement to belong and advocate particularly to the African American people that lives in the US. This is why Black Lives Matter is focusing their demands exclusively based on the cases they see and experience in their lives, while they can't experience the discrimination in other regions. So this movement would not thrive efficiently in each region. And then, people of color, especially Black people, has been discriminated ever since the beginning of the US. The study case of this is the Southern and Northern American War that we have popularly known as the Civil War, that fights about the rights of Black people that were taken as slaves. The system in the US then creates this division of rights and segregation, and overall builds a racist system that is still being implemented right now. The Black Lives Matter movement in US has specific agendas, while BLM in US is focused on the rights of living and doesn't demand for independence, just the admittance of their rights and to be treated equally, while other regions are demanding the independency from their political powers or even their states. This difference in agenda alone can make the movement to be seen differently or worse, harmful, as each countries and states would see this as a separatist movement that is harmful for the country's sovereignty. This could be used by people with bad intention to break the unity in a country, and thus can be harmful for the Black Lives Movement image, while the BLM specifically just ask for a system reformation to treat people equal, not entirely to break free from a country to be independent. It will take away the spotlight of them. The fact that Black Lives Matter is founded and advocated specifically for Black people in the US, if we try to add another cases of oppression outside the US, racism and colorism, for example, the movement wouldn't exactly be focused on them anymore, thus making the advocacy isn't going effective. Just like the LO has stated, every region has different political spheres and different focus of the fight of rights. In US in particular, and in this case, is focused on fighting systemic racism that is very violent and extreme, that is reflected on their laws that resulted in police brutality. Other colored people went through different struggles, while the US black people particularly experienced wars that heavy or extreme violence is inflicted upon them unprovoked. Like they usually just walk around doing nothing, but then they got shot just because they are black. And with too many focus on the issues in different regions, the movement will become ineffective as they divide their focus. And to mention that different regions has different roots of racism and systemical prejudice that needs to be understood. This movement is created and held because they know exactly what is wrong with the system and what they want to fight for, and that they live in the region in which they know exactly what the problem is, what the root of this racism came from. And Black Lives Matter isn't even enough for or to advocate the people in which it's originally founded from. It's very doubtful that this organization could help advocate for other regions or other ethnical groups or oppressed groups. This is why we believe that the motions shall fall. Thank you.
Check, check. Hello.
Yes.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard we have heard what have been stated by the opening opposition and by the opening government as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, the opening opposition keeps saying that if we expand our goal, if we expand our campaign to include similarly oppressed and alienated racial groups, we will divide our focus and we turn ourselves from the more specific focus into less focused campaigns. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to clarify something. So we know that we experience the same prejudice as we experience the same prejudice as theirs. We all know that black lives people actually. We all know that every oppressed and alienated racial groups actually experience the same prejudice as the black lives people do. If we actually create a wider range, create a wider goal, we can actually work parallelly for all movements together. Why? I will explain into my arguments further on. So my rebuttals for my first rebuttal for the opposition is for the leader of opposition, that stating that the motion is harmful for the campaign itself if we make the range is wider, and Black Lives Matter actually only happen in the US because it creates. So if we make the range wider, it creates a less focused movement. So, ladies and gentlemen, we change our focus because we change our goal. So we're not really actually lessen the intensity of our focus. We actually make our focus, which is actually to make the goal. It is actually to create a campaign for all oppressed ethnicity and racial groups, so that so we're not actually we're not actually change our focus. We actually change our goal, but have the same concept so that we can work together. And how the leader of opposition actually using a jumping logic. The leader of opposition doesn't really explain the mechanism of how it can make, if we make our goal wider, it actually can make people make people less motivated than from actually campaigning in the Black Lives Matter campaign. So they're not actually explaining any mechanism towards it. So for other rebuttals will be included in my arguments. My first argument is that all oppressed races are minorities that are very hard to gain voice for themselves. We can agree on that, right, ladies and gentlemen? So with expanding our campaign to all similarly oppressed and alienated racial groups, for example, Indonesia, which is the Papua race, we can erase the discrimination at once for all oppressed racial groups in all nations, because we can agree that how big the momentum has the Black Lives Matter campaign has got. We can agree on that because due to the media, due to the support of all people. So we can use this momentum to erase all discriminations at once. Why it could happen, ladies and gentlemen? We can see that for ourselves, the Black Lives campaign has already gotten so big, and many people have already supported it. So if we use this momentum at once and you change our goal and actually focuses on the discrimination, we focus on all oppressed races in all nations, we can actually finally erase discrimination to oppressed racial groups. Why it can erase all discrimination? Well, if we didn't use this momentum at once to erase all discrimination, when then? We can agree that gaining awareness of people is hard and needs time. Without proper strategies, we can't start this campaign from zero again. So there will be if you ask me, there will be separate campaigns like Papua Lives Matter too, like what the leader of opposition says, right? No, it can't be like that. If we start another campaign, we won't have the same bigger or massive backgrounds as we already have now in the Black Lives Matter campaign. In fact, with all oppressed racial groups gather at once, isn't it a chance to have a better voice for the campaign too? Isn't it a chance for us to have a better, bigger background for us? And because we all know, and back to my statement again, we all know we experience the same prejudice as theirs, so we can actually work parallelly for all movements, ladies and gentlemen. So proceeding to my next argument is that now we have the chance to expand the movement to the world, like to all nations. Black Lives Matter, which already explained by the opening opposition, is only prevail in countries that have black people in it, thus making it movement itself mainly for these nations. So, but we can see for ourselves there are so many oppressed racial groups throughout nations. For example, in China, that has been explained by the opening government that Uyghur are oppressed by China people in their country and they can't join the movement as well because it's completely a different narrative. So, but again, if we use this momentum to actually gather wider range, which is all oppressed racial groups, we can actually all oppressed group in all nations will actually use we can actually use this narrative to to stop the oppressing of racial of oppressed racial groups itself, ladies and gentlemen. And proceeding to my last argument is that Black Lives Matter campaign is also seemingly to be overshadowing other oppressed racial groups campaigns due to the massive support itself. And we can, of course, back to my statement again that the Black Lives Matter is already gotten so big, so that we can know we can probably seemingly see that the Black Lives Matter actually oppressing, actually overshadowing other campaigns that could probably start, ladies and gentlemen. Back to my first argument again that of course if we want to start another campaign we have to start from zero again. We have no backgrounds in it. So due to the massive Black Lives Matter campaign has got, people actually already have attention to the Black Lives Matter already, and they can really focus on other campaigns that probably just gonna start just start, ladies and gentlemen. So if we probably want to start like a Papua Lives Matter campaign, our movement can't start because we're not massive enough, and because we don't really have voice, we don't really have bigger voice, ladies and gentlemen. So we can see for ourselves that probably the Black Lives Matter actually seemingly to be overshadowing other campaign, other probably oppressed racial groups campaigns that could have started during the Black Lives Matter campaign. So joining this momentum using the Black Lives Matter campaign that has already have big momentum is actually will be beneficial for all oppressed racial groups campaign. So we as the closing government strongly propose this motion. Thank you.
Okay, now for the member of the opposition.
Okay, thank you. First, I'm going to respond, and I'm going to explain why why it could be divide focus if we include similarly oppressed to Black Lives Matter. First, it has different root of problem. Like it said before, and they kept talking about Uyghur in China. Well, that case is already have different problem with the Black Lives Matter. So that's why it could be divide our focus, and also the target of the campaign itself. It's also different. Even though we have the same goals, about the target and the focus or the matter is already different. Let's see that. Why is the focus of Black Lives Matter? So Black Lives Matter is a movement that focuses on anti-African American racism in the US. If we want to include other movements to this movement, it can break, like I said before, it can break the focus on the campaign itself, because every campaign that has a different focus and goals and also different target. Let's see the cases. The root of this campaign, this Black Lives Matter. Philando Castile, Afro-American man, was shot by the white police on 2016 when his car was stopped by a police check. Also, we can see the case of Alton Sterling in Louisiana, or Breonna Taylor that died in his own apartment, or the newest case, George Floyd. That is the root of this campaign. And if we want to include other movement, it could break our focus on this matter, this focus, because we, like I said before, we might have the same goal, but we don't really have a same target that we want, for whom that this campaign. Well, we can see from this campaign, these cases, even after a long time, it is unclear how the future and struggle of minorities in the US to obtain the same treatment need a long time to solve this problem that related to Black Lives Matter. If we include other movement, it would take longer time to solve it, because the matter, the target, it could be different. So that's why we don't stand this motion. Thank you.
Okay, the whip of the government, please.
Check.
And
Okay. Mr. and Madam Speaker, so today I'm as the government whip of our today's debate. Before I proceed to my resume to my conclusion of our today's debate, firstly, I would like to remind you that expanding the focus of something is different from giving less focus. When we're expanding our focus, it means that we're still having the same intensity of focus, but it is into more important goals, or wider goals, ladies and gentlemen. So here's we're going to see why we think that the victory points should be ours. So firstly, why we do agree that we should expand this Black Lives Matter campaign to include this other minority from all over the world. Firstly, because it could gain more power. So we know that
there are hundreds or maybe thousands or millions movements of minority all over the world, but they are all separated, ladies and gentlemen. For example, let's see to the BLM itself. The Black Lives Matter narrative, or the BLM itself in America, has started since early 2013, ladies and gentlemen. So it means that it takes almost like 7 years for this narrative of Black Lives Matter to finally have a voice. So since 2013, they have different organizers in several cities in America, but it hasn't succeeded until 2020. For example, in Chicago, how groups of people are failed to charge those police officers who shot at least 68 people to death, and then how the Dream Defenders in Miami who failed to help a Black woman who didn't hurt anyone when firing a warning shot at her abusive ex-husband, and those things happening for years until at one moment in 2020, it becomes something important. It becomes something that is heard. It becomes something impactful, ladies and gentlemen. So it means that it takes so long time for every minority groups to have their voice out, to be heard in the society. So that's why we need to use this momentum. We need to use the power that this Black Lives Matter campaign has gained to create a bigger impact. And also, if we see from the opposition side how they say that it could create certain attachment to those minority that doesn't do like looting and things like that. But ladies and gentlemen, we should realize that from the very first place, this minority has always been degraded. So no matter what they do, no matter what they show, they express to help their minority, to help their society, it doesn't matter. They still attach to certain behavior. So what we need here is that, because we know that no matter what we do, we're still attached and being degraded to some bad behavior, and we're still count as criminals, we're count as terrorists. At the very least, with this movement, with this expanding of Black Lives Matter, finally these voices of these people are being heard and they become a big movement, ladies and gentlemen. That is the first thing. And then the second one is that how it is we could expand this movement to all over the world. So we've seen several examples before, like the Uyghur Muslims in China, and then the Myanmar military that wants to genocide those people in Rohingya. And firstly, we need to see that, okay, Uyghur is most of them are Muslims, but still Uyghur is an ethical group, ladies and gentlemen. So it is still in a parallel movement with us. So even though they are persecuted for their religion, but they still face the same prejudice. They're both count as a criminal. They're both count as terrorists. So it means that we're still in the same track with this movement. So why do we have to expand this movement to all over the world, ladies and gentlemen? So it is because those people that are out of BLM, they can't be included simply because BLM sends a different narrative from what BLM promotes, right, ladies and gentlemen? But actually, from the very beginning, Black Lives Matter has always been more of a human rights movement rather than a civil rights movement. So it means that the Black Lives Matter's focus has been less about changing specific laws and more about fighting for a fundamental reordering of society so that the minority is free from systematic dehumanization. So the arguments from the oppositions about how it is we have a different political system, we have a different laws and things like that is not relevant to this motion, ladies and gentlemen, because from the very first place, from the very beginning, this Black Lives Matter has always been focusing on those human rights movement rather than a civil rights movement. So it's a universal value that could be used in every minority movement. It can be used in all over the world. So then why do we think that we have the responsibility to expand this Black Lives Matter? So firstly, the opposition team keep on claiming that we can support all of those movement without expanding our our Black Lives Matter campaign, right? But how? They didn't explain it. How can we support them by not including them in our movement, right? So it is actually our responsibility, because it seems like we're overshadowing those other smaller movements, those other movements that are out of America, out of those Black Lives Matter. But we all have the same misery, we all have the same suffer, and thus we have this the responsibility to help these people, to help this minority, to help these racial groups, to help these oppressed people, to help them out, to help them have the voice in the society, because we already get it in the current status quo, ladies and gentlemen. So, and then if we see to the closing opposition, I didn't get any points. It seems like they're just repeating the opening opposition, so I could not give any response to that. So based on those things, we believe that this motion should stand, and we beg to propose. Thank you.
Halo, suara saya kedengaran? Okay. Good morning, everyone. I am Laura as the opposition whips, and to summarize this debate today. So before I start the new extension that I will bring to you and the summarization of this today's debate, I will do some rebuttals for the previous speaker, and there are 2 points that I would like to rebut from the closing government. So they said before that because of this Black Lives Matter, it kind of like overshadow the other campaign that much more like smaller in compared to the Black Lives Matter, and how that would not going to make the focus of that Black Lives Matter being diverted because of the other focus that are being brought by these other oppressed groups. So I think we kind of like forgot that. Let me remind you again that this Black Lives Matter is actually aimed for the Black people issue, the Black people that have face a lot of racism and discrimination because of their skin color, and based on those events, that is why the Black Lives Matter campaign even occurred in the first place. So to say that the Black people within the Black Lives Matter is the main priority in this matter. So as my colleagues have stated before, that we should focus on the real ultimatum focus of the reason why this Black Lives Matter is being even made into a movement in the first place. So we just cannot like solve all the problems that other similarly oppressed and alienated racial or ethnical groups have faced into the Black Lives Matter, because Black Lives Matter have more important issue that they need to tackle first, because they have faced a lot. No, thank you. Because they have faced a lot of oppression since the slavery has ended 200 years ago. People still have this the way of thinking of looking at black people as much more inferior than those who are white people, or for this matter the Caucasian people, and how that being implemented into the systematic racism. So, and the main trigger of this Black Lives Matter itself is because the police brutality and the systematic racism. And so what is the goal actually, right? So it is because what black people wanted is that they would like to have liberation, that like those white people or Caucasian people have. They want to live their life just without being oppressed, without being judged by their skin color. So no, thank you. Moreover, the challenges that black people have faced against racism is more complex. So to incorporate the other problems from different ethnic or racial problems would make the problems that black people trying to eliminate, trying to eradicate, for that matter, much more complex, and it will need more time, as my colleagues have stated before. It will make the Black Lives Matter not being the focus anymore, because everyone needs the focus, right? So it's kind of like basically it's not being prioritized, and so and also that, as I said before, that black people want to have liberation, and same goes to black people, but the people that are part of the LGBTQ community. So to say that not because that only they are being faced with racism based on their skin color, that they also being faced with the discrimination toward their sexual orientation, which makes this Black Lives Matter much more complex, and to eradicate the problems that relate to the black people that have faced issues regarding to much more complex operation regarding to their skin color. Okay. So that is why many the supporters of the Black Lives Matter people say that all lives don't matter until the Black Lives Matter. So to say that, as the leader of this opposition has stated before, that that the expansion of Black Lives Matter is to other oppressed and alienated racial or ethnical groups would harm the goal of the movement itself. Because as long the goal of the Black Lives people, the Black Lives Matter is not being achieved yet, that we cannot. Then how we can achieve the other goals of other similarly oppressed and alienated racial or ethnical groups? How we can do that if you not still achieve the Black Lives Matter goals? So that's the reason why this could harm the priorities, the primary goals of the Black Lives Matter itself. So let me emphasize this more, that the oppression that the black people have is much worse than the other similarly oppressed and alienated racial ethnical groups. Like for example, the Spanish Asian people that may have established their life in the United States. They have different. Have you seen an Asian people like for example the recently case when there's this man, a black man called Ahmad Arbery, was killed just because he was jogging around the construction site, and he was killed by two people with guns. He was being shot by these two white people. Have you ever heard a white person or even Spanish person or even Asian person being shot while you're jogging, minding your own business in constructions in daylight without being armed or whatsoever? No, we never heard that. Because why? Because black people always receive much more complex and even much more worse discrimination or racism towards their skin color. And that's why Black Lives Matter is much more important. It's not saying that other racial ethnic groups don't matter. So let me emphasize this more to summarize that to the expansion of this Black Lives Matter into other oppressed and alienated racial or ethnic groups will harm its sole goal of the campaign. And that's why we, as the opposition team, would strongly oppose this motion. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, contestants. Please leave the room, the audience too.
Thank you.
Reflection.
Judges, let's go into the debate room just in case someone go in.
Kita di judge room, Kak Hans.